Let me set the stage for you. It's August 1998 and Marvel movies aren't a big thing yet. No X-Men, no Spider-Man. Those are a few years away, and the cinematic universe is a decade away. Actually, scratch that. In 1998, Marvel movies weren't really anything. Straight to DVD gems, an unreleased Fantastic Four movie, and the last theatrical film based on a Marvel character came out 12 years ago, and that movie was Howard the freaking Duck. DC and WB had plenty of hit Batman and Superman films, but Marvel was waiting for that first hit, that first box office smash with one of their characters, that first success. Who would've, who could've guessed that would be... Now, before we talk about the blood-boiling badass Blade, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Marvel Collect by Topps. Marvel Collect is the ultimate destination for Marvel digital collectibles where you can collect your favorite characters from across the Marvel multiverse. You can trade with fans around the world 24/7 to acquire the cards you need to complete your missions and sets. Every day, you'll have new missions that you can complete to earn rewards, which will help you earn more gold, which means new packs to tear open. To kick things off, you can use the wheel and 1 energy to collect some packs or free gold. And it looks like I got some free gold. That's a win. I also already have a ton of free gold from claiming the free daily rewards, so now I can open a bunch of packs and try to complete a set. I'm aiming to get Blades, so this video has some poetic cinema, so give me a second. Okay, the Guardians, J. Jonah Jameson, and there we go.
Nice Hitopfilms.
Now that I have all these cards, I can claim more daily rewards, trade with other collectors to complete my sets, or fuse common or duplicate cards to upgrade to rare and more unique cards. My username is, surprise, surprise, HiTop Films. So if you want to collect and trade with my pretentious ass, follow my link in the description to download Marvel Collect by Topps and start collecting and trading today. If you didn't know, this is a 3-part series with 2 YouTube legends. You are watching part 1, my part. Captain Midnight is tackling Blade 2 and Godzilla Mendoza is the lucky soul who gets to cover Blade Trinity. Make sure you check out those videos after you watch this one to get the full Blade experience. Now, I was a little less than a year away from being born when Blade came out, so sadly I missed out on the theater experience for the entire trilogy. Instead, my parents showed me a VHS copy of Blade when I was 8. Thanks. And my 8-year-old brain wasn't scared, not at all. My 8-year-old self thought that Blade was the coolest shit ever, because frankly, Blade is the coolest motherfucking vampire slaying, bone breaking, throat tearing, badass shit ever. I was way more a Spider-Man kid than a Tomb of Dracula kid, so I'm in no way attached to the source material, other than a few comics and his appearance in the 90s Spider-Man show.
Must be destroyed.
These movies are my only exposure to the character, which I assume is and was the case for a lot of people, which made him the perfect character for Marvel Entertainment, New Line Cinema, director Stephen Norrington, and writer David Goyer to adapt.
I always had a fondness for the character, and because of that, I just thought it would translate well to film. He doesn't have a bunch of costumes, and he's got gadgets, but they're all... I mean, it sounds odd to say, but Blade was a much more realistic character, and it's in his own way.
Which makes the fact that Blade isn't an origin movie even cooler. The opening of the film is so efficient at hinting at his origins. We get these haunting series of shots of a woman in labor, with blood pouring out of her neck. We start to hear her heartbeat faster and faster. Her baby is born. And then... this sets a strong tone. This followed by what turns out to be a vampire rave in the back of a slaughterhouse where blood rains down from the sprinklers as 100 vamps get ready to devour this poor schmuck before Blade shows up and slays so many of them. Like I said, this sets a strong tone. This isn't Captain America and this ain't the X-Men. This is Blade, and Blade is far from a standard superhero film. It has much more in common with John Wick than it does with a movie like Spider-Man. It's not a heartfelt, relatable drama with superhero action. Blade is a mystery, a damn good action movie martial arts vampire mystery. We find out about the world Blade inhabits, about the vampire class system, about the punky rebel bad guy vampire Deacon Frost, and about just who the hell and what the the hell Blade is as the film progresses. It's not bogged down by having to over-explain everything to the audience. There is an obvious audience surrogate in Dr. Karen Jensen, a hematologist who Blade saves because she reminds him of his mother, but she never takes away from the momentum and energy of the movie. In fact, I would say that she allows us to see Blade's heart, his vulnerability.
I have spent my whole life looking for that thing that killed my mother. It made me what I am. And every time I take one of those monsters out, I get a little piece of that life back. So don't you tell me about forgetting.
Blade isn't a film rich with character, but Blade isn't really trying to be a film rich with character. It's an ominous neo-gothic, super stylized 90s action flick with extraordinarily well-crafted and executed action. But that doesn't mean it's entirely empty. There's a nice bromance, an implied father-son relationship between Blade and his badass mentor Whistler that serves as the emotional core of the movie. There's also a nice parallel between Blade, a half-human, half-vampire, the Daywalker, and Deacon Frost, an impure vampire, someone who is turned instead of being born one, which is a big no-no in the minds of the vampire elders.
Not even a pure blood.
Among vampires, these two are both rejects. Blade tries to kill them all and metaphorically kill and contain that part of himself, while Frost tries to control them all and fully embrace that part of himself by becoming the Blood God.
Blood God's coming, and after tonight, you people are fucking history.
This is the most comic booky element of the movie, and it feels pretty out of place. Our boy Deacon wants to sacrifice all the elders and summon the powers of La Magra, this ancient vampire god. Oh, and it turns out that Blade is the chosen one and they need his blood to summon La Magra.
The blood of the Daywalker.
Let me rant for a second. Pretty much the only thing I truly dislike about this film is this moment. Spoiler alert, Whistler is dying. The man who took Blade off the streets, the man who trained him to be a vampire hunting machine, the man who is basically the only father figure Blade has ever had, is dying. The scene is well directed. Wesley Snipes turns the cold but vulnerable performance up to 11, but the fucking script decides this, which should be emotional moment, is where they need to drop the fucking chosen one speech.
You're the chosen one.
Motherfucker, are you out of your damn mind?
It also turns out that Blade's mom, the woman who we saw in the beginning of the film, is actually alive and starts getting a little funky with Blade in this real Freudian scene. It's weird, it's cliche, and it's a waste. Blade's entire motivation is the death of his mother, and now that she is alive and is a vampire, this theoretically should throw Blade down the biggest existential spiral ever, especially considering he just lost his father figure. But instead it's resolved pretty much right after it's introduced.
Your mother died a long time ago. I'm your mother.
The film was originally 20 minutes longer, had this goal.
After I'm done with you, I'm gonna f the whole human race.
And had Morbius show up at the end, so I assume this internal conflict was much more developed and more of a conflict, but still, it feels like they were trying to make this story bigger than it needed to be. Anyways, Blade's execution is where it truly shines. It was the first Marvel movie and the first comic book movie since Batman Returns to be dark and gritty, to take the characters and the world seriously while never taking itself too seriously. Now that doesn't mean it constantly forces comedy down your throat. It never pauses for a joke that isn't funny or a quip that's out of character, but instead has the humor come from the action, like this vampire wannabe cop who Blade keeps tossing around.
Fuck yourself. Fuck me. No, you suck this.
Or this Frost goon that Blade keeps finding new ways to try and kill. It's actually funny, and not the studio audience laugh track kind of funny. You know what I'm talking about. It's more a twisted Looney Tunes style humor and far more energetic.
He's like, you have 20 guys around him. I was there, man. He's got shit he throws at you. Then you
Like
the
yeah, you got the sword,
exactly.
shit, yeah, you throw it in the air, catch it underneath.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You
shut the
fucking-
fuck up!
The entire film has this visceral energy, this hyperkinetic vibe that works so fucking well. Just look at this crazy car chase. Where are you ever going to see something like this now? The action is off the wall. I'm talking insane martial arts. I'm talking ludicrous stunts pulled off by Wesley Snipes himself. I'm talking a great blend of practical and CG effects. I'm talking Blade getting into a spin kick off in the middle of the climax. I'm talking Blade getting into an MMA fight with this 12-year-old vampire. I'm talking so many bullets, so many blasts, so many stabs, so many limbs flying, so many heads exploding. I'm talking Blade pulling a dude's throat out and then throwing that throat at another vampire. I don't know what to say, it's freaking incredible. Blade is also a damn gorgeous looking movie. From the varied set design that contrasts the sterile and clean and nightclub vibe of the vampire world with the dirty urban streets of Los Angeles to the insane creature and weapon designs and even more insane camera moves.
What?
Blade has a unique visual style, especially by today's superhero movie standards, that creates this tangible world, a believable world, but also a hyper-stylized world. A world with the darkest shadows, the brightest whites, and a chilled blue tone that accents it all. The legendary film critic Roger Ebert summed it up perfectly. At a time when too many movies are built from flat TV-style visuals of people standing around and talking, movies based on comic books represent one of the last best hopes for visionary filmmaking. It's ironic that comics, which borrowed their early visual style from movies, should now be returning the favor. Blade is great, man. I love it. I had such a good time rewatching it for this series. I was honestly worried that my cynical, critical little ass would fall out of love with it, that it would be worse than I remembered, but the love is very much still there. I appreciate it more now than ever. It ain't perfect, but it's so refreshing. A movie that came out in 1998 and is very much a product of the time brought me so much fun, so much joy during this nightmare of a time we are living in. So if you haven't seen it, and I'm sure a lot of you haven't, or at least haven't revisited it in a while, watch Blade, dude. Go watch Caps and Xavier's videos and then go watch the trilogy. Go have a great time. Come back and comment your thoughts on it. I'd love to hear them. During the late 90s, Marvel Entertainment was at an all-time low, which explains why this movie is so ballsy, so risky. Black Panther gets the credit for having a black lead in a comic book movie, and Deadpool gets the credit for being an R-rated violent potty mouth. But Blade was way before all of that. Blade was the transition into the 2000s era of caped cinema. He was the first Marvel character to have a successful box office debut. It cost $45 million to make and made over $130 million. And ultimately, he was the first Marvel character to be taken seriously on film. So next time you hear me rant about how Marvel should take more risks, think about Blade. Think about how Marvel's first on-screen success was a giant creative risk. Think about how Blade was the comic book movie that sliced and diced so films like Spider-Man could swing and soar.
You fuckers at a bad time. One guy on foot.
I owe you, man. I got 2 new hands, Blade.
Let's do this.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill. There's still a war going on, and I have a job to do. Starting in Bosnia. Nobody's...